Hi, I'm Shanna Raker with the Missouri Department of Conservation out here at Rockwoods Reservation. And today I'm going to talk to you about how to tap sugar maple trees. The first thing you need to know is how to identify the sugar maple tree. And once you have figured out which tree is the sugar maple, then you can take the tree and get mom and dad and grab a drill and put a hole into the tree. Then you can take a spout, like a water tap, and put it into the tree to collect sap. And then once you have the sap, you can cook it down and make it into real maple syrup. So first thing you need to do is identify a sugar maple tree. And the way that you can identify it in the wintertime is by looking at the bark. And the bark on sugar maple trees is hinged. It flares out in little flaky pieces like that. And so you know if you have a tree like that, that it's probably a sugar maple. Once you have the sugar maple tree, then you need to make sure that it's at least 10 inches in diameter from one side of the tree to the other. If it's at least 10 inches, then it's big enough that you can tap the tree safely without hurting the tree. Next, you're going to grab your mom and dad and get a drill, and you're going to put a hole in the tree about 1.5 inches into the tree. So that's what I'm going to do now, is put a hole into the tree. So next you're going to get your tap, which you can make these at home out of a wooden broomstick or a dowel rod. You just take it and make a hole down the middle of it. Or you can buy these at a maple sugaring equipment store. And you put that into the hole, and then you use a hammer to just tap it in until it's in there nice and snug. And then that's it. You've tapped the tree. That's why it's called a tap, is because you tap it in with a hammer. The next thing you need to do is hang your bucket on there. And we use these large metal buckets, but you wouldn't have to. If you wanted to, you could use a milk jug or any other container you had. And then we like to put a lid on our buckets to keep the rainwater out and some of the animals, so that we keep our sap as pristine as we can. And there you have it. That gets us started on collecting maple sap to make maple syrup. So whenever you have your sap collected, the next thing you want to do is start cooking it, because you got to cook it to make real maple syrup. That's what we have going on here. We've taken our sap and we've put it in this big evaporator pan, and we're cooking it and cooking it and cooking it to evaporate some of the water. It takes 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup, and so we have a lot of water to boil off, and that's quite time consuming. Now, if you don't have a big fancy pan like this at home, you can have your mom and dad just use a regular pan, but you do want to do it outside, because remember, 39 gallons of that water is going to evaporate off, and you don't want that in your house. You want to make sure that that's outside. You can finish the cooking inside when you have just almost a syrup, but in the beginning you definitely want to do it outside. So you cook it and cook it and cook it, and some people wonder when it's done. Well, it's done when it gets to 219 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's when it's just the right consistency. It's about 2/3 sugar and 1/3 water, and that's when we know that it's real maple syrup, that it's done. The next thing that we do is we filter it, because sap contains not just sugar and water, but also some impurities like minerals and things like that out of the soil. And we want to filter those impurities out. And so you can do it through a dish towel or any kind of cheesecloth or material like that. We use a big fancy filter, and we filter it through there, and then you can can the syrup and it's ready to eat. So this is another way that you can cook maple sugar and make maple syrup at home, is if you wanted to put a kettle over a fire, you could do that. This is actually how historically they would have made maple syrup and actually maple sugar. The Native Americans figured out this process. They discovered it, and they actually weren't making maple syrup at all. They were making maple sugar, because maple sugar doesn't have to have a container to be put in. You know, syrup, you have to put that into some sort of container. Well, maple sugar, you don't have to do that. They could make blocks of sugar just like this one and store it, and they would actually use it to trade and things like that. So what they would do is cook past 219 degrees. Of course, they didn't have thermometers. They would just guess on the temperature. When it got really thick and bubbly, they would pour it into a log bowl like this one, and they would stir it until it would cool. Of course, it would be liquid, and they would cool it a little bit, and then they would pour it into the mold like this. And then when it got all the way cool, they would pop the block of sugar out, and then they would have their block of sugar. Now, occasionally they would make granulated sugar like you see in this bowl, and they would stir it until it completely cooled in the bowl, and then they would have granulated sugar just like this that they could take and use that as well.